Everyone, to the CO podcast series, Stroke Matters. A special thank you to Northwestern Medicine Lake Forest Hospital for sponsoring this podcast. My name is Christine Winicky, CO Director. The topic for today's call is spirituality. I'd like to introduce our presenter for today. Dr. Jeremy Misselbrook is a board-certified chaplain serving Northwestern Medicine in the Chicago area. He is also an adjunct professor at a number of colleges and universities in the areas of humanities and theology. Welcome, Jeremy.
Thank you.
Thank you for doing this. And we have some questions, so I'd like to start with the first question is, what is spirituality?
I think that spirituality has to do, in a larger sense, with the extra natural, that which exists in addition to the physical universe, the natural universe. And specifically in terms of human spirituality, I like to define human spirituality as the connection we share with the extra natural world, the way we identify with it, and in many ways, the way we express that connection. I, for instance, define religion as a means by which many people express elements of their spirituality. Some people choose to pursue and express their spirituality by what they would identify as non-religious means as well. In fact, many people would consider themselves spiritual without considering themselves necessarily religious. And I feel that our spirituality is that connection that signals to us that we are more than just the sum of our natural parts.
Great. That makes a lot of sense too. What does it mean to live in the present moment, particularly in these times and what's been going on?
Well, I appreciate that question because these can be very scary times. We all have scary times in our lives, and I think in particular what we're going through in the world right now is just there seems to be a lot of collective things going on, and so being present is so important and not necessarily easy to do. To be present, the way I understand it and express it, is to be mindful, to bring our mind and our thoughts to where we actually are, what we're doing, what we're feeling, what we're experiencing, and sometimes just the fact that we're being. And so to be in the present moment means all of those things that have brought us to this moment in our lives. They inform us and they shape us, yes, but to be present means to be present in what I'm doing right now. For instance, in this present moment, I'm talking to Christine. I can be thinking about a lot of different things and what's going on and what I need to do in the next hour and so on, but that's not being present. To be present would be to really be focused and honed into what I'm actually doing in the moment that I'm doing it. So the shorthand is I try to bring my mind to where my body is. And that's what I think it means to live in the present moment. Now, to make that a pattern for your life, we can't just, be driving down the road and say, okay, I need to be mindful and pull over to the side and stop and be mindful. Of course, you could do that, but it's not practical that we can do that every moment of our lives. We're not, sitting in caves up on mountains somewhere and just able to meditate for days and months and years at a time. So how do we factor that into our everyday lives? It's about just taking time out of the day. It can just be 30 seconds while you're waiting for the light to change, or if you're waiting for an elevator, or if you're sitting in an office, just taking a moment and bringing your mind to where you are and thinking, what am I feeling right now? What am I thinking right now? And being present in that moment.
You know what, and I just think that's such good information, because I know even personally for myself, you're always thinking ahead. You're always thinking about what's the next thing you have to do or what has to be done. And I think that we don't live enough in the present moment and just stopping to be present like we're doing right now. So I agree with that.
Right. And for me, it factors into something that just happened. Oh, I just read an email, or I just had a conversation, or I just had an encounter, and we work it over and over in our head for hours and hours and days at a time. And sometimes it just helps to take a moment and trying to be present with that. How am I feeling about it? And it helps us to cope, because, as we'll talk about in a little bit, there's a lot about life that we can't control and that we have to learn how to cope with, because we can't just fix it. And being mindful helps us to just find where we are, and is a great coping mechanism in and of itself.
That's great. Another question I have is, how does someone obtain peace?
Okay. Well, what is the opposite of peace? What if you were Mr. Tolstoy, you would say it's war, right? Mm-hmm. And in a way, I think that's appropriate. I think the opposite of peace is suffering. And what is suffering? Suffering is what happens when we fight against the pain in our lives. Pain is unavoidable in life. I'm sorry if it's part of it. Like the gentleman says in The Princess Bride, anyone who says otherwise is trying to sell you something, because pain is unavoidable. We can try to ignore it. We can try to run away from it, plan ways around it, promise ourselves and others that it won't happen, but it will happen. But that's pain. Suffering is when we fight against that pain, when we resist it, when we refuse to accept it, when we try to ignore it. And suffering can be mitigated by acceptance, accepting that pain exists, that things happen in our lives that are not pleasant, and that we're not weird or wrong because we're experiencing it. We didn't do something to deserve it, at least not all the time. I mean, actions have consequences, yes, but just inherently, we are not in this world to experience pain. This is something that happens, and we're not weird or wrong because we're experiencing it. Peace can be found in the midst of pain. It does not exist apart from it in this life that we have. And so, again, how do we mitigate it? By accepting it, by being mindful, by accessing our spirituality, doing those things that can bring us joy, not to get us to ignore pain or to distance ourselves from it, but to help us, to remind us that pain is not the only thing in life. It's unavoidable, but it's not the only thing. There are a lot of great things going on. I bring people's attention to this all of the time. I work in a hospital, and people ask me all the time, how can you do your job as a chaplain? Isn't it so hard? And yes, honestly, it is hard. I don't say it. I don't tell them that, because I just say that I consider it a sacred privilege to walk along people in these very meaningful moments, and being present with them and participating with them and seeing how brave and courageous people are and the decisions that they make and the amazing things that they overcome in their lives. That's inspiration to me. And so I find peace a lot of times in the midst of suffering by accepting that it is part of life. It's not pleasant. I don't necessarily like it, but there are a lot of great things going on too. It's not all pain. There's a lot of success. There are a lot of heroes and heroines out there who are doing their best and bringing their amazing skills to bear. And everyone listening to this podcast has a story like that and is one of those people who at some point in their life has helped someone or listened to someone or done something to help their fellow person. And that's bringing peace to the world. And so I don't see obtaining peace as some objective in life, as a way of escaping pain. It's something that we do in the midst of it and brings fullness to the life that we have.
That's awesome. That was a great way of describing it, because you do have suffering and it is a part of the journey, but there is peace through that. So that's great. I have one more quick question for you. What, especially now, should we do when we feel scared and overwhelmed?
Well, I think we can agree that no one wants to feel scared or overwhelmed about serious things in their lives. Sure, some people like scary movies, or going on roller coasters for the thrill. And I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about being scared because something is happening or has happened in our lives or in the lives of people that we care about, and we are really afraid of it. That's what I'm talking about when people are scared or overwhelmed. So what should we do? Well, first of all, we have to recognize and name that we're scared or that we're feeling overwhelmed. Do you know what you're feeling? At any given time, it helps me to name it and identify it. There's no shame in feeling scared and overwhelmed. Taking a minute to be mindful and say, I'm scared, takes practice, especially if you've never done it. People often learn that it's wrong to feel scared, or it somehow means that you're weak and vulnerable. Being scared doesn't mean you're weak. Sometimes it means you're smart. If you're, standing in the middle of a road, although I don't know why you would be there, and a giant truck's rushing at you, being afraid of that is a smart reaction. It's the right reaction, to be afraid. And you recognize that when you're in danger of some kind, whether it's emotional danger, physical danger, and that fear motivates us to do something about it. It powers our bodies and powers our minds in ways that we don't even have to think about it. We just do it, reflex. But having that feeling of being scared or feeling overwhelmed does not mean that you're weak. It happens to everyone. So just recognizing it and even naming it out loud. This makes me feel scared. This makes me feel overwhelmed. This makes me mad. Things like that, to just help us to verbalize what we're feeling. So that's the first thing we do. And then the next thing we do is we sit with it. We sit with our emotions. We tend to react to these emotions in a variety of ways. If we get scared, a lot of times we get angry, or sometimes we become withdrawn, essentially the fight, flight, or freeze response. And that's okay. Our responses are shaped by a combination of our natural makeup with our lifetime of experiences. So just notice how it makes you feel. And sometimes your body will even tell you your emotion before your brain catches on. Is there pain or pressure somewhere in your body? If so, where? Like if you get scared, a lot of people have a feeling in their stomach. It sort of tightens up. And sometimes our bodies signal our emotions before our logical brain can say, I am feeling scared. Because the centers for our emotion and our survival and our logic are all stored in different parts of our brain. They talk to one another, but sometimes they take turns. So if I'm feeling a really strong emotion, I can't, sit down and do my math homework because my brain's just not in it. But accepting that we do feel scared sometimes, and then even sitting with it, recognizing it for what it is, instead of trying to ignore it or run away with it or shame ourselves for feeling it in the first place. Then when you're ready, sometimes you can intervene. If it's appropriate, you can take time to calm yourself. Again, if you're standing in the middle of a road and a truck is bearing down on you, don't take time to calm yourself. Intervene by getting out of the way. But sometimes just naming it is all that it takes to help you cope with the emotion. But there are additional practices you can do. You can meditate. You can take action by doing something that brings you joy. You can stop watching the news, or at least limit yourself to the amount of time that you watch it every day. But sometimes we just need to talk to someone that we trust. There are a variety of things that we can do that help us to cope with it. But again, just having those emotions is not wrong or inappropriate. And sometimes we need to seek professional help. If we're feeling really scared and really overwhelmed all of the time, you might need to seek out a mental health professional or a physician that can help you cope with these things. Because sometimes, given the circumstances of our lives, sometimes our physiology makes us kind of prone to being anxious. And so just going at it with a sense of curiosity and learning about yourself and looking for different resources that you have to cope. A couple of resources I could mention, and again, I'm not endorsing everything that they do, and I don't have any disclosures about their resources. It's just a couple of things that I've found. One is Dr. Kristin Neff, Kristin, and then her last name, Neff, Neff. She's a self-compassion a researcher and author. There are numerous videos on the web of her talking about self-compassion, and her website has free self-compassion exercises you can listen to. Just look up her name and go to selfcompassion.org or org. And there are lots of exercises that you can do and just incorporate them into your life. Sometimes just doing the simple act of doing something like putting your hand over your heart, like you're saying the Pledge of Allegiance or something, and just sort of giving yourself a brief little hug to know that you're okay and that you're safe. That helps us to cope. And then there are numerous resources. I won't go down the list, but if you look up anything that has to do with mindfulness, being aware or mindful, being purposeful in our thoughts and actions, those things will help you to cope and be able to have quality of life even in spite of the things that happen, because we all feel scared at times. We all feel overwhelmed. It's not a bad or weird thing, but we don't want to stay there. That's not a healthy place to stay for too long of a period. So it's like anything, grief, anything. We can learn tools to use to help us cope with them. We don't want to stay in any of those places too long, but it's natural that we would experience those things. And I just recommend that people find different ways in their lives of coping.
That was absolutely excellent. And I loved when you said to name your fear, because I never thought of that before, but that's absolutely excellent. Well, I just want to thank you again, Jeremy, for being our presenter today. If you'd like to listen to today's podcast or past podcasts, you can visit the CO website at www.sseo.org. Thank you. And thank you again, Jeremy.
Thanks, Christine. It was my pleasure.